Krishna, everyone. Welcome to class 17 or so of the Bhagavad Gita. We're on chapter 14, the three modes of material nature.
Yay!
It's literally my favorite time of the week, and this is one of my favorite chapters, and it's very practical. I promised that last week. It's going to be a lot of stuff you can share with other people. And do we have any announcements or anything to start it off before we get into kirtan?
Excuse me. The one announcement would be about Friday, which is Gita.
Yeah.
Gita Jayantra, right? If we want to do a Zoom, if there's people who are on Zoom that want to do the full reading of the Bhagavad Gita with us on Friday night, we're going to start it at 6 p.m. and go until about 8:30. Usually takes about 2.5 hours. And we're going to read it, I think, all in English.
Yeah, that's the day that Bhagavad Gita was spoken, over 5,000 years ago. And so it's a really special day to remember, and we're going to have a reading. So we'll put it on Zoom.
Yeah, and I've only ever done it once, where you read the whole Bhagavad Gita from beginning to end. I zoomed in with the Denver community last year, and I was just crying at the end, because it just was this like being in the vibration and having the opportunity to read it all, just the verses, not the purports, from beginning to end is really, really powerful, and to do it in community. So even if you can just tune in for a little bit of it, if you want to, can we have like spirit fingers for anybody who thinks they may want to do that virtually? 1, 2, 3.
Wow,
Okay,
cool.
A bunch of you. All right.
Awesome.
So we'll create a Zoom link and make it possible to do that virtually. And then anyone who wants to come in person can do that too. That was it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So without further ado, we'll start off with some kirtan,
Yeah.
and then on to chapter 14.
Musicians audio.
Mhm.
I forgot to do that today. Yeah. So happy to be gathering with you all. I missed you so much in the last 2 weeks. So come into your comfortable seat. Take a deep breath out. And we arrive here together in Sangha, in spiritual community, with intention, with attention, with devotion, with love, service as we chant kirtan, and as also we engage in kirtan just by reading the Bhagavad Gita. That's kirtan too. Our opening prayers is honoring of all of our teachers, the acharyas who have come before us, for bestowing the light of knowledge upon us and removing the darkness of ignorance. With immense gratitude and all the mercy we've been bestowed, we chant these opening prayers together. Take a deep breath in, fill up. Hare
Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. Great to be with all of you again. So we're starting on the 14th chapter, the three modes of material nature. As I always like to do, we'll start with a little review. Last week's class was on chapter 13, the second half of chapter 13. And even that second half was divided into two, so we could make work around technical difficulties for the recording, but we made it work. And let's just take any reflections of anything that came through for you from the recording, from your reading, from your thoughts on chapter 13, the second half of chapter 13. There's a few really special verses that we highlighted. Anything that stood out for you? I noticed a couple things for myself, but
I just,
yeah.
A lot of the reports really, I don't know, particularly striking out. Like he finishes them really like a strong finish on all the purports. I was just looking through like 23. It says here, thus the intelligent person who places his faith in the Paramaha, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, begins to advance toward a blissful, eternal life of knowledge.
Powerful.
Very well said.
Steve is appreciating the purports, Srila Prabhupada's definitive statements and how he concludes his purports. Thank you. That verse is actually like a very notable verse in general. I'll pull it up here just to look at it. 1323 is one of the verses I highlighted. Talking about how within the body there is another knower. There is the supreme knower, the super soul. Verse says, within this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and was known as the super soul. We talked a little bit about this function of being enabled, being supported in whatever we're doing, that we turn our attention, we have a will, we turn it to a certain direction, and the super soul allows it to happen, permits it. So there's this relationship there. It's like we only have such limited power ourselves, but when we turn our attention to a certain direction, then we get support. So we can, for example, actually develop a relationship with the Supreme Person, which I can't even bench press my own weight probably, but we can do that with his support. Or if we want to, we can also go to the gym and get supported to bench press your own weight. Whatever you want to do, it's actually being permitted and enabled, overseen.
Excuse me, Shamya. Was that 23 or 33?
23. 23, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other reflections from the 13th chapter?
I have one, and it kind of follows pretty similar to what you just said, Shanya, Prabhu, that when we see how deep our ignorance is with identifying with the body and enjoying separate from Krishna, that super soul becomes our friend, right? When we start to see that, Krishna's like, okay, you want to enjoy the external potency? Go ahead, go for it. You're going to find misery in the material because you're not this body and this is not, really who you are. But I'm going to give you the knowledge in the Vedic literature to help you transcend it. And so when we're able to combat our conditioning with the literature Krishna's given us, and we focus our pleasure on pleasing Krishna, then that helps us achieve happiness and get closer to that perfection. And the other reflection I had on that is okay, then how do I focus on the pleasure of Krishna, right? And how do I try to give everything to Krishna? And then I just came back to the power of prayer. And, personally for me, it's that idea of like, it's just been kind of coming to me like every day that, before you get on the tough phone call, say the prayer and offer it to Krishna. Before you eat your food, right? You offer it. Before you have a tough conversation with your sibling, you offer that. And so when you get in that mood of like that prayer to Krishna before everything, it helps you kind of see, that stuff as an offering, and sees you not as the body, and not see you as the doer, and not see you as this external potency, but that connection to Krishna is made a little deeper. And so I think in this chapter, he like really spells that out, like really goes to town on saying, this is not who we are, but this is, but you're going to go there, and I'm going to help you get through it.
Thank you. Yeah, especially from verses like 19 or 20 onwards, that string of verses there really deals with how we're kind of life after life chasing different things, and because of that we meet the good and evils of the world, and the Lord is facilitating that. And at the same time, yeah, what you're saying is completely true, that there's this process of, well, you first started by talking about hearing, like the literature, which is something that Krishna mentions in verse 26. He says that one really practical way of understanding the supersoul is by hearing. The verse, part of the translation is, because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they, people who practice hearing spiritual knowledge, they also transcend the path of birth and death. And then you talked about, prayer, living and moving and acting prayerfully, so intentionally, setting attention and not just kind of going with the flow of material nature. Material nature is the topic of the 14th chapter. So that flow will be described, that natural flow of the world, in 3 major divisions, and then how to transcend that. So thank you. And we had something from Nadia as well.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Shami, last week you said something in response to somebody's question about like, oh, how do we prioritize all these different things that are asked or that we're invited to participate in? And I like that you said, if you can't do anything else, sit with devotees. And
Yeah.
if that can just be the one thing you do, and I'm just grateful for this group of devotees.
Me too. Like I said, it's my favorite time of the week. It's powerful. When you get to devotional sangha, that's when the magic happens.
Could they hear her? Can you ask?
Could you all hear? Yeah, they can hear. Perfect. All right. Any other comments or questions before we go into chapter 14? And as always, we're really grateful for all the comments and questions and reflections on the WhatsApp thread. It really keeps things vibrant. So thank you for that. All right. Okay, chapter 14. In Sanskrit, it's called Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, the yoga or connection through the 3 modes of nature. Guna means modality or quality. So there's 3 different qualities to the modes of to material nature, and we're going to explore that. So we've heard about material nature throughout Bhagavad Gita. It's one of the major topics of the Bhagavad Gita. The world, nature, the nature of things. So Krishna establishes himself earlier on, like in chapter 7, verses 4 and 5. He establishes himself as the source of both matter and spirit. That there's or as the 13th chapter put it, there's the field, there's the inanimate world, material nature, and there's the knower or observer of that field, which is all of us as distinct individual conscious entities. And there's a distinction there between us and the field, because we're actually not matter. We're actually part of Krishna also, just like matter is, but constitutionally different, distinct. It's a different kind of category because we can actually be aware. That which can be aware is fundamentally different than that which cannot be aware. So we can be aware of, the inanimate things. And so Krishna establishes himself as the source of both of those, matter and spirit. And so this chapter deals with matter and the modalities of matter. Modalities means like the different qualities of matter. And because of that, it's really accessible, because we're all living, as Madonna put it, in a material world. And we're all just, yeah, that's right. So we can relate to that, because even as devotees, we have a material aspect to our lives. In fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the Acharya or great teacher, who gave that instruction about if you can't do anything else, just sit with devotees. He said also, he talks about how we have two aspects to our life. We have there's some fancy Sanskrit, the Vyavaharika and the Paramarthika. We have the part of our life that has to do with our worldly duties. And we have our eternal or spiritual identity and duties. So for example, I have to put biofuel into this bio machine. It's not negotiable. I can choose what I put in there. I can choose whether I offer it to God and the divine or not. But I can't not do it, at least not for long, because at that point I will either die, or more likely I'll stop fasting and just cram food in my mouth because I have to, because I'm living in that kind of body that needs that. You know, I have duties to other people. I have duties to the legal system, duties to society, duties to family. You know, Christmas is coming up. That's a thing. You know, birthdays, weddings, funerals, social engagements, traffic lights. Filling your tax return, being polite to people, all these things are part of the world, and they're actually part of our duties. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur doesn't say, you know what, throw it into the ocean, kick it off a cliff. He doesn't say that. He says this is part of our life, and you do it. And at the same time, he draws a distinction that we have our eternal duties, because those temporary ones, they're always changing. You know, I'm doing different things than when I was Eleanor's age. I had different duties then. I had to go to school then, and my mom would make me lunch. And then, you know, I had to like pay attention, and I guess I still have to pay attention, but not in the same way. The duties change. And so the realities of our material situation are always shifting. But what was true then, and what's true now, and what's going to be true in a few years, or if I'm in another material body, what's always true is that I'm always connected to Krishna, and I have a relationship with him. So our Paramarthika duties are like our hearing of Bhagavad Gita, our discussing, our being with devotees, our chanting, our kirtan, our discussing and applying spiritual philosophy, our offering food to the divine and partaking of it as his mercy and so forth, going on pilgrimage, these kinds of things. And so he draws a distinction. So this chapter is about the world with its qualities and rhythms and modalities. And so because of that, I'm making the case it's really accessible because we're all in that. And, you know, with very few exceptions, people come to bhakti with a lot more knowledge of the world than they do of their own spiritual identities. So when you see a text like Bhagavad Gita giving really practical and I would say like testable information about the world, then it increases, at least it did for me, it increases your confidence about how, well, Bhagavad Gita is saying this about the world and that works. So if it's saying this about my nature and about God, and about the practice of spirituality, then I guess that could work too, which helps us to then apply those things. So, the first verse I'll point out is verse 4. Krishna says, and I'll share this here, the screen. Sarva yonishu kaunteya murtaya sambhavantiyah tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. He says, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, O Arjuna, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. Right? Anybody ever heard of Mother Nature? Like every like culture, tradition in the world talks about Mother Nature. So does the Bhagavad Gita. So does Krishna himself. And he says, I'm the father. He says the material situation is provided for by Mother Nature, one of his energies. One of the aspects of the feminine, of the divine, is that it manifests as the world, with all of its rhythms and all of our bodies and everything like that. And he says, and I am the seed-giving father, right? You plant a seed in fertile ground, it grows. He says, that seed is coming from me. I'm the seed-giving father. That because you're related to me, that's how it is. You're a spiritual energy coming from the Supreme Spirit. And you're temporarily in this material situation that's being provided for by the feminine. And so we have Mother Nature, Father, that's Krishna, Father, the masculine aspect. So that's there, and just a nice little reminder of where we're all coming from. And he says all species, doesn't just say humans, or to speak of only the people from this country, or only people who look like that. Like, not just all humans, all species of life. The viruses, the plants, everything. Then he says in the next verse, material nature consists of three modes. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. And I'm pretty sure we've heard about these throughout Bhagavad Gita. If you've been, especially glancing through the purports, Prabhupada talks about them. They are also mentioned in passing in the verses. So I'll give the Sanskrit for these because they are kind of really perennial words. This is verse 5. You can see the Sanskrit here. Sattvam rajas tama iti. Iti means like in this way. In this way, there's sattva, rajas, and tama. Sattva means goodness. Rajas means passion. Tamas means ignorance. And the qualities of them, their symptoms, their effects on us, what it feels like to be in them, what happens when you are in them, what are the consequences. That's what the majority of this chapter deals with. So the idea is that when you're in the world, which we all are for the duration of this life, whether we're practicing bhakti or not, we're in the world. You are subjected on some level at least to these modalities. Now when you're practicing bhakti, when you're transcending the world, you're only somewhat affected by what's happening externally. I won't say you're not affected at all. Like even with great devotees, really saintly, amazing people who are very powerfully connected to the divine, the Saint Francis of Assisi, the Prabhupads of the world, we see that they acknowledge what is happening around them. Oh, the seasons are changing, or there's war now, or this, that, the other. And certainly for ourselves, we are affected. And the more we are in the world and very much conditioned and identifying with our bodies, the more we are affected. But the purpose of this knowledge is really to help us get free from being bound up by the world and to connect to Krishna more and more. So the idea is, as you'll see in the chapter, sattva, as is evident by its translation as goodness, is actually better for us. You're going to be in the world, it's better to cultivate the mode of goodness. So in the next verse, the very next verse, verse 6, Krishna starts talking about this. Tatra sattvang nirmalatvat prakashakamanayam sukha samgena bhatnati jnana samgena chanaka. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. When you're in the mode of goodness more than the other modes, you experience knowledge. There's more knowing. As a contrast, just so you can get a sense of what a range of experiences are, the next verse after that he says, the mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings. And because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive actions. This term fruitive, it's a word that's not used so much in English. Prabhupada uses words very, very carefully to have a specific meaning. Fruitive means that which bears a fruit, that which creates a consequence. So when he's saying that the embodied living entity becomes bound to material fruitive actions, it means actions where you're doing something to get something back, right? And so this quality, he says, of being associated with unlimited desires and longings, right? You see even the word passion, which is the English translation for rajas, this mode of nature. Passion indicates hankering, wanting, intense emotion. And so in passion, one experiences being carried away, one experiences a motivation for doing, for activity. And in in tamas, the third mode, Krishna says, the mode of darkness, tamas, the mode of ignorance, is born of ignorance, and it is delusion. It is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, which means laziness, and sleep. Some more symptoms. Verse 9, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness. Passion conditions one to fruitive actions, so actions to get a result. And ignorance binds one to madness. So this is still kind of very theoretical and abstract, so I'll make it more practical and relatable, I think. If you think about when you look at the times of day, right? The early morning is associated with sattva. There's an increase of sattva, mode of goodness at that time. This is why generally all living entities, not just humans, they're not really so active. They're not like doing things and making things happen at 5 o'clock in the morning, right? If they're even awake at that time, they're usually doing some exercise, usually light exercise. They're meditating, they're praying, they're doing spiritual activity. Let's set aside people with a night shift. The natural cycle of things, right? That's what's really conducive at that time. What happens at noon? All the birds are busy. All the animals are busy. All the businessmen and businesswomen are busy. That's the sun is out completely. Our energetic power is at its maximum. Our intellectual prowess is like super focused. How do I get things done? This task after this task after this task. Waiters are waiting tables. Businessmen are doing this. People are writing checks. The stock market is in full swing, right? So that's Rajas activity. And then everyone winds down. The world itself winds down. It becomes darker, literally darker. And then if anyone is going to like have some intoxicant or kind of like do that kind of thing, it's generally that time, the distraction time.
Binge watch Netflix.
Binge watch Netflix. And then you go to sleep, which is literally just, a controlled state of unconsciousness. And that's tamas. It's like rest, ending, ignorance or darkness. It sounds very, very judgy, but the idea is like, imagine if we were asleep our whole lives. How
People are.
some people are, but if we were like literally sleeping our whole lives, it's just sleepwalking around, like not even really awake. It would be pretty bad. You would never have any higher aspirations, never have any higher thoughts. So these things are coming and going in waves. That happens every day, what I just described. And so what we're hearing about in this chapter are these 3 different modalities and how they can mix and match. So they're not always like in isolation. There's never like only ignorance. There's never only passion or only goodness. There's always some mix. But when we hear about these symptoms, we can think about how different kinds of people, different kinds of food, which will come up again in Bhagavad Gita, different kinds of activities, different kinds of even music and art forms are in these different modes of nature, right? Like there's a different quality. There's a different quality that happens to the consciousness if one goes to, classical theater where, some really precisely planned out piece of music is played versus like death metal. There's a different effect on the consciousness. So everything is subjected to this, what we eat, There's going to be a different effect on my body if I eat fruits and vegetables than if I eat like things that
Chips.
yeah, even chips. Chips are like, I could take the whole potato and like eat it without frying, or I actually just fry it down and put a bunch of salt on it, and then it's going to have a different effect. Like this is really practical, so we all know this. This is why you can't have too many. You can't let your kids have too many. This should have been the Halloween class, right? You can't let your kids have too many candies because it just throws you completely off. So let's hear some more about these symptoms. So we're going to relate to it more. Verse 10. I'll share the screen. Oops, where are we? Yeah. Sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance. Sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times, ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there is always competition for supremacy, right? So at some times of day, it's easier to do things that are supported by the mode of goodness, and at other times of day, it's harder. Like, try going to a busy street corner and chanting Hare Krishna, your personal practice there and then. It's going to be a lot harder than if the whole world's asleep and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning and you're awake, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, chanting your japa, chanting Hare Krishna on your own. It's going to be a lot easier to do it then, because the modes are working with you. Whereas if you want to get work done, better schedule it for the middle part of the day, because the modes are actually conducive to that. This is why they pay people who do night shifts like 20% more or whatever, because it's really awkward to go counteractive to the natural flow. It's not easy. Not just sleep, it's like everything is backwards. Okay, continuing. More about the mode of goodness, verse 11. The manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. Again, knowledge. So when there is, well, we heard about the qualities of knowledge in a series of verses in the 13th chapter, right? So like it starts with humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, that whole list. When one is in the mode of goodness, one can experience knowing more, right? As you can see from the translation for tamas, ignorance, the mode of ignorance is really counterproductive to that. Like, remember a time when you were so angry that you like forgot someone who's like really dear to you. Like you're arguing with them and you forget the nature of your relationship because you're so angry. You go into tamas, you go into ignorance. You ignore that. You cannot appreciate the truth. And as soon as you come out of that modality, you like realize, oh wow, like I was taking it for granted, I was doing this, I was doing that, I was in ignorance of some things. Whereas if you're really calm and peaceful and present, you can be aware of that person's influence on your life, you can feel gratitude and so forth. And so that's sattva. Similarly, if you show up to a class, you've gotten enough rest, think back to your college days. You got enough rest, you ate well, but not too much. You're like, your body's clean, you're distraction free. That's a big one these days. You turn your phone off, you're like there with the teacher, professor. You're in the mode of goodness. You're like a sponge, you'll soak up everything. But if any of those other things aren't true, less. You didn't get enough sleep, good luck, right? You're distracted, you just had an argument with somebody, you're overate or underate, you're itchy because you didn't this or that, you didn't take a shower this morning because you're a 21-year-old, and that's like just not cool or whatever. You're just not going to take in knowledge as much. So again, these are symptoms. 12, when there's an increase in the mode of passion, the symptoms of great attachment, fruitive activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering develop. We've all experienced this at different times of our lives, wanting this, I remember begging my mom for this toy, like I really, really wanted it. We all want something sometimes. And it's actually it lowers the consciousness from sattva. When you're in sattva and goodness, you're satisfied. You can just be present in the moment. Here's another division for you. Goodness means now. Passion means thinking about the future, hankering, wanting, thinking, oh, if I have that, I'll be happy, planning. Tamas means regret, lamentation, even parts of nostalgia, is like, oh, living in the past. Past is ignorance, the future is passion, the present is goodness. If you can really be present, really be satisfied with who you are, what you actually truly are, you can sit with that, you're in goodness. But if you're like always about doing things, you have to have that. If you're thinking, if I just had that, I would be happy. It's a symptom of passion, right? And cultivating that kind of lifestyle will increase passion for you. So we have the relationship of, we can see that based on my symptoms, what modes I'm in, right? And I can choose to cultivate different modes. I can choose to practice presentness. I can choose to practice cleanliness, knowledgeableness, simplicity, and be more in sattva. Or I can choose to practice hankering, complication, planning, future thinking, or lamentation, victim mentality, intoxication, oversleeping, depression, I have some amount of control over that. Let's go on here. Yeah, he says ignorance, verse 13. Some of the symptoms are an increase in darkness, inertia. Inertia means like you can't, like your momentum, you can't like change your momentum. It's like you just ever feel like I can't even get up right now. I don't have it in me. I just can't deal. Can't have a conversation with anybody. I don't want to watch TV. I don't want to like read. Inertia. It's like everything just seems like it's too much. Madness and illusion. Of course, at the higher levels, when there's a lot of tamas, the mind can become deranged. You can actually have derangement and illusion, like just mistaking one thing for another, right? We had like optical illusions, mental different things, spacing out. We all have imperfect senses. We can't understand the world perfectly anyway, no matter what we do. But the more you're in goodness, the more you have knowledge, the more you can actually see things the way they are. Otherwise, not as much, you know? When you're in passion, you can't really tell what's true and what's not. And when you're in ignorance, often you'll mistake truth for untruth, and untruth for truth. You'll have a completely opposite, 180-degree conclusion. When you're in ignorance, you could think your best friend is an enemy, right? And you can think an enemy is a friend. Let's pause here for now. I think we can get through this chapter, but I would like to pause and see how this is sitting for all of you, anything standing out, or if you have any questions, or if this is bringing anything up for you, reflections. And I'll sip some water so I can keep this body in homeostasis and goodness. Too dry is not good.
I like to think about the gunas like H2O, excuse me, like water. You just saying that made me think of it, like, because they're all present at all times and they're inextricably connected because they're making up all of material energy. But at any given time, one is like more present, you know, than the other. And so like they're not like demonized. Like we actually do need to sleep, so we need to move into that inertia or like tamas in order to go to sleep at night, in order to rest and digest and to process and, you know, evacuate, all of those different things. But that that is tamas. So it's also not. We want to live more in a sattvic way and ultimately want to transcend all of the modes of material nature, but to not also like demonize.
Yeah,
Tamas,
not like
like,
beat
how would
yourself
you
up
speak
because
of
you
it?
have to sleep or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes you see this in the early days of the Hare Krishna movement. Some of the monks were like so fired up to serve Krishna, so like interested in bhakti that they would like really cut corners in their sleep. And yeah, I mean, you can only do it so much before you end up like crashing a car because you pass out at the wheel or whatever. So like Srila Prabhupada would joke when he goes to sleep, he's like, "Yep, time to waste time now," because he didn't love doing that. He had such a desire to serve Krishna, but he would still do it. Of course, at his level, we could see that his practice was so powerful, so concentrated. He only needed like 3 hours of sleep a night. But he's also a great saint. You know, he never experienced jet lag anywhere he went. He was just like, whatever, let's just do it. So we can't fake that,
Right.
and not beating yourself up about it.
And then same with Rajas, like we need to get things done.
Yeah.
Like we need to be productive in the world. We need to do our service, you know, but we want to do it, and that takes passion about whatever it is the service you're doing, but then to do it in a mode of sattva.
Right. Yeah, like we've been talking at different times in our classes about different people's different natures and acting according to your nature. You know, if you put me like on a field with a plow or something, I could probably do something, but I wouldn't do a very good job at it. It's not my nature. And if you got the farmer who's like a lifelong farmer who's really good at that, and said like study the Bhagavad Gita and give a class on it, they wouldn't necessarily be great at that. Because there's certain modes involved. Like I've always loved sitting still and reading. That just made me happy, you know? It's not better or worse. I mean, a lot of people out there read nonsensical books and misuse their intelligence. So it's not as if that I'm a better person or a worse person. It's just my modes. You know, some people are more active. Like as a child, they're always moving around. My nephew's like this, so active, right? And it's like, that's not a bad thing. The world needs active people. It's just a question of how you apply that, how you use it. And it's good to know what modes you have, because if you need to be active in doing things, you got to make sure you orient your life around that. You got to make sure like you're not being asked to sit still all day at school and then come home and like sit still. It's like those people got to work, they got to get out, they got to be in nature, they got to use their hands, their feet got to touch the ground. It's like they need that to feel sane and centered. So that's also there. And as far as like sattva being better, it is the case. It's better for us because it'll help us be more clear, help us be more distraction free. And to the extent that we can control our lives, we should try to cultivate sattva. That's what societies have done since time immemorial. The successful ones is basically give us tools to be in knowledge and be in presentness, because that serves materially and spiritually. You know, even when you're working, it's better to be working with like a clear vision of what you're doing than just like you know, like a chicken with its head cut off.
Mhm.
That's like pure passion. It's not very good though. You're everywhere, but you don't know why.
Welcome the mindfulness movement.
Yeah, the mindfulness movement. It's like I gotta move, but better be mindful about how, why, where I do it. Don't like elbow anybody as I'm doing it, or pull a
Stop
muscle
my
or
toe.
whatever. And ultimately, you want to do it for Krishna, which we'll get to. The chapter we'll get to. Eileen has her hand up.
Modes of moderation.
So I think you kind of may have answered my question, because I was kind of on the same wavelength as Kelly with where I was going to go. You know, I'm in the world of future planning, in financial planning, and in my work life. And so it is that, like, you know, sometimes some people are like, you know, carpe diem, seize the day, live for the now. And I'm like, well, there also needs to be, like, I don't want to be a burden on my child, and I want to work so that, like, I can have things so that he doesn't have to take care of me. And like, I think about, like, you know, what's the mode of which I'm doing the planning. And so that's where I was kind of saying, like, there's that dichotomy there. And so yes, with an aim to be sattvic, but like, yeah, there kind of needs to be some planning or some future thinking, because otherwise, you know, societies can kind of fall apart. So I think you kind of got to the
Yeah.
answer, kind of where my head
Actually,
was
like
at.
living completely in the moment without thinking about your consequences is a kind of ignorance. It's actually a kind of ignorance. Because sometimes goodness and ignorance look similar. Like the great saintly person sitting on a mountaintop, like totally peaceful, and the person who's like imitating them but is actually taking a nap. They can look really similar. So part of you see, here's another division for you. Ignorance is destruction. Passion is creation. Goodness is maintenance, right? If you want to maintain a healthy life for yourself, you have to plan ahead, because you know with your sattvic knowledge that you're going to continue existing past this moment. And you know that, okay, I will always exist as a soul. That's always maintained. And as long as I have a body, I have to do some work to maintain that body. So I will maintain this body through, you know, smart financial planning, getting an education, eating properly, having good association, meeting my emotional needs. So that's actually sattva, because it's maintenance. Just like not doing anything at all will result in degradation, destruction. If I don't invest in relationships, they will fall apart. If I don't invest in my intellect and education, it will degrade. If I don't invest in my health, it'll just be like, you know, terrible. If I don't maintain it, it's actually always falling apart. Because as long as you're in the world, with every second that's ticking by, things are just kind of degrading more and more. You have to put in some effort to keep it maintained. That's goodness. And maintenance is actually the hardest one to do, right? You go to a beach, how long does it take to build a sandcastle? An hour? A couple hours? How long does it take to destroy a sandcastle? A couple seconds. How much work does it take to maintain a sandcastle? A lot of work. So you want to pick what you maintain. Pick your battles, but also understand that maintenance is the work of goodness. Maintenance is the most valuable work you can do, because if something's really good and true and worth protecting, you have to keep it around, right? Otherwise, you have to keep reinventing it, creating it again. That's the work of Rajas. It's like, oh, this idea, that idea. But what about the idea you already had? How about like fanning that spark and letting it keep burning? How about that? So what I'm hearing from you, Eileen, is like, yeah, planning work. But I'm pointing out, like, planning work isn't just passion. The part of it that's like ideas can be, but the part of it that's oriented toward maintenance, keeping things steady, that's actually sattva. People who are sattvic are also punctual, for example. They're more aware of time, and they like honor time, and they're able to meet commitments around it, maintain the schedule.
I, um, hi.
Hi.
I have so many thoughts going through, so I'll try and, I mean, it's reflecting on what everyone's saying, but like, I had a client today that was talking about wanting to do these workouts, and he was comparing himself to his father, who's like, you know, doing all these marathons and this, and it got him, he was so passionate about it, but it took him so far away from like who he is by comparing. And how I think of like you know, the duality and the equipoise going into this is like, we're allowed to be angry, but we shouldn't make someone feel bad. Like, it's like kind of like holding both of like, I'm allowed to have this feeling, but it's how I present it to that person.
Right.
That's what mode we're kind of using. Or like, I want to be in the mode of goodness, but if I give too much to someone, then I don't have anything left for myself. So that's why I kind of put like mode of moderation of like kind of staying with in the modes and, you know, kind of having that balance of going back and forth, like allowing us to, yeah, I think we need to tap into all of them, right, at different times, but not to let ourselves get pulled too far one way, like planning about the future. If I'm doing it from a place of wanting to control, wanting to like out of scarcity, out of fear, then yeah, it just takes
Yeah.
us further away from that, I guess.
Here's some more distinctions that might help you.
Yeah.
It really helped me. Motivated by fear, tamas, ignorance. Motivated by gain, passion, rajas. Motivated by duty, rightness, morality, order, structure, goodness. In terms of communication, relationships, passive aggressiveness or denial, or victim mentality, ignorance. Aggression, anger, like as an aggressive tool, attacking, passion. Goodness means I'm neither denying what's real for me, nor am I attacking you with it, right? Like in tamas, I don't matter, only you matter. I'm not important, only you're important, right? It sounds like it's very noble. It's not. It's actually not noble. It's actually self-denial. It's actually victim mentality. It's actually not healthy. Passion is I matter and you don't, right? Notice that distinction. I'm right, you're wrong. Goodness, you matter, as do I. You matter, as do I. And we're connected, and I can remember that connection. So these are some distinctions. Yeah, they're there in relationships, they're there in the world, they're there in, yeah, in everything. So, yeah.
What did you say, Shami? Fear is ignorance.
Yeah.
Duty is goodness.
Gain.
So,
Gain.
yeah, when you're motivated by fear, that's ignorance. Even like, for example, you can practice devotional service out of fear. Oh man, I don't want to go to hell. I gotta worship God, you know? Anybody can do that in any tradition. It's actually a function of the modes of nature. It's not actually the tradition's fault. It's not God's fault. It's what mode are you in? Are you going to practice your devotional service out of fear? Are you going to practice it for gain? Like, I really want to get some, I want to go to heaven, or I want to like be more successful in the world. Or are you going to practice it because it's the right thing to do? And ultimately, higher than the three modes is love. Love is beyond duty, right? Love is beyond duty. And Krishna is going to make that point in this chapter. I'm going to give you a little sneak preview that if you act for him, you actually transcend all the modes, including goodness. We want to cultivate goodness, but we don't want to be defined by it. Like, our practice of bhakti isn't meant to be just like, this is the right thing to do, this is my duty. It's meant to be about developing love for Krishna. We're capable of that. And what's a more powerful motivator, duty or love? There's nothing more powerful than love. It's more powerful than fear. It's more powerful than gain. It's even more powerful than duty, than honor, than reason. It's completely unreasonable in the best way. So, yeah. Shall we continue? What do you think?
Yes.
Okay. We got to like text 13. All right, so Krishna talks about some of the consequences of being in the modes of nature. We've already talked about reincarnation. And so there, in the next two verses, he talks about different destinations for those who live their lives in different kinds of modes of nature. The 14th verse, he says, when one dies in the mode of goodness, they attain to the pure higher planets of the great sages. So there's elevation there. There is a higher destination. When one dies in the mode of passion, they take birth among those engaged in fruitive activities, like here, this planetary system, this culture, this time, this place, very much passionate oriented. When one is predominantly in the mode of ignorance, they can take birth in the animal kingdom, This is how people can have different kinds of bodies. It's not just humans that are being talked about here. Humans have the free will to choose what they do with themselves and what modes they cultivate. And we can degrade or elevate ourselves into our next destination by that. Of course, our goal notably isn't to create a better destination in the material world. Our goal of practice is to go to Krishna. But our destination and our situation is a result of our previous choices. That's there. More symptoms here. From the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. From the mode of passion, greed develops. From the mode of ignorance, you get foolishness, madness, illusion. So now, I'm going to take us all the way to the 26th verse. There's some nice verses, 22 to 25 in particular, talk about the symptoms of somebody who's in a state of being transcendent to the modes of nature. Krishna says, when you can transcend all these three modes that are associated with the material body, you can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. He says in verse 20. Arjuna says, how? And what does it look like? Though what does it look like is described in verses 22 to 25. It's a lot of the same kind of things we've heard before. Being equal in happiness and distress, seeing a lump of earth, a stone, and a gold equally, being steady, equally situated well in praise or blame, not having any enemies or playing favorites. And then we get to the how. How do you get to this? Very, very important question Arjuna asks for all of us. And with that, I'll share verse 26. Another of the most famous and important verses of Bhagavad Gita, 14:26. Krishna says, Mang chayo vyapicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samathityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Brahman means spirit. This is our process. Just like I said earlier, serving out of fear is ignorance. Serving out of passion is, out of hope for gain is passion. Serving out of duty is goodness. When you're fixed in bhakti, you can actually transcend all the modes of nature. Real bhakti doesn't have to do with any of those things, fear, aspiration, or duty. It has to do with love and our natural connection with the divine. And that practice actually allows us to completely transcend the modes of nature. This is how the saintly people of the world have transcended difficult situations or been indifferent to so-called positive situations by maintaining and being centered in their connection with the divine. That is their secret. That is what Krishna is talking about here. We may not be able to cultivate the mode of goodness perfectly, but that's not really our goal. We can't cultivate it perfectly anyway. As Kelly pointed out, we have to sleep, we have to do our activities. We want to have a sattvic lifestyle as much as possible. But more important is to have a devotional lifestyle. Just like I gave the point earlier about, we may have different modes associated with our bodies and minds. Better to know those modes and do our duty properly and devote it to God than to do a so-called higher duty, Don't try to be an academic or a professor or a sadhu, a sage sitting on a mountaintop alone, simple, celibate, thinking that's better. Just do what you're good at doing, but do it as a service. Do it devotionally, which is all the way back to chapter 3 is what Krishna is telling Arjuna. It's one of the major messages of Bhagavad Gita. And here he's making it in a different way. That, okay, now look at these modes of nature. Goodness, passion, ignorance. Here's how you can understand them in the world. Look around. Here are some of their symptoms. And you're not meant to be in them. And you can't just choose, I don't want to be in them anymore. The mode of transcendence is service, dedication, applying yourself for the pleasure of the divine. This is bhakti, and this is bhakti yogena sevate, he says, by the service of bhakti yoga. Sagunan samatityaitan, but you can transcend the gunas, the modes. So once again, he's offering another way of helping us understand why bhakti and how bhakti and what does it do, practicing bhakti. This time looking from the perspective of the world and the modalities. So I think we'll end there for the week. The last verse he just says, I'm the basis of the Brahman, the spiritual. It's resting on me. It's kind of just adding substance to his claim that if you dedicate yourself to me, you become spiritual. You transcend the modes. Because I am myself the source of all that is Brahman, all that is spiritual. All right, now we can take any comments or questions, any reflections on anything from the chapter on the modes of nature, the application of this philosophy in your life, or any thoughts. A lot of good stuff here. And I maintain that, if somebody wants to know about Bhagavad Gita and they only have like a couple minutes, if you tell them about the modes of nature and you talk about it in your own words, in terms of things they can relate to, they'll get it. Everyone gets, the effects of eating in ignorance, eating passion, eating goodness, what it does to your body and mind, activities in those modes. And that's kind of what the chapter is about. And ultimately, it's about transcending them through dedication and devotion. Any comments or reflections? Questions?
I have something.
Yeah, Samantha.
Hi, Haribol, thank you. So this was a lot, but it was great. So I know the gunas are kind of rotating, they're ever present like H2O, but is bhakti also like practicing bhakti to be more in the mode of goodness in this lifetime before transcending into the eternal?
Yeah, so like in other words, is it necessary or important to try to cultivate goodness before we can, really connect to the divine? What comes first kind of thing?
Yeah, because it's kind of like, are people obviously having more sattvic lives than others, and they're experiencing more goodness, so they can, outbalance the others at times, it seems like, right? But just in terms of living in this lifetime, like to experience the sattvic life, it's nicer than kind of being caught in the passion and ignorance and
it is
right. So
it is favorable. A lot of the reasons people have, I see, for coming to like kirtans and bhakti gatherings is because they have recognized that, although they may not put it in these words, they've recognized that the culture and lifestyle that we've embraced is really much a lot of passion, a lot of rajas, and the results of that are problematic, to say the least. The way we deal with each other, the way we see ourselves, our bodies, the natural world, our relationship with money, our relationship with everything, is a lot of passion and ignorance, and it creates problems. And a lot of what people are looking for at first is solutions to those problems, which are basically provided by a mode of goodness lifestyle. Mode of goodness doesn't just mean like you have to be a celibate monk living on a mountain somewhere. It doesn't mean that. You can be very much like a balanced, gentleman or lady in the world with a family and be in the mode of goodness. Absolutely. And living in that way does really deal with a lot of the problems that we've created for ourselves societally. And if you do live in that way, if you do have healthy relationships, you do take care of your body, you like see the world as worth protecting and important, and you stop and smell the flowers kind of thing, you will have more success practicing bhakti, because those things are all supportive. You're not gonna be like, think about it. You start chanting your japa, your mind starts going off into whatever its natural thing is. Would you rather at that point your natural thing is like peacefulness and stillness, or like you're internally headbanging to a death metal concert? Really sticking to the death metal enthusiasts out there. I'm sorry. It's nothing against that. Just like, whatever your mind is naturally, it's water seeks its own level. So that's what's going to come up in your practice. And better it's peaceful and still, because you can then chant more attentively, calling out to the divine. It's easier. However, that being said, this isn't a movement for people who are just in the mode of goodness. That is not our goal. Because Lord Chaitanya, he didn't come here because he thought, oh yeah, this is the fallen age, everyone's going to be like super, super in the mode of goodness, ready for bhakti. It's like, no, the opposite. This is the fallen age. No one's ready for that. We are distracted. We are more distracted than ever. It's right there. The Srimad Bhagavatam talks about it. We're going to be so distracted. It's going to get worse. However, this bhakti process is applicable and available and accessible for anyone. I know many people who've come from like intense situations, addictions and different things, like really, really hard situations that their practice of bhakti helped them get through, and they were able to access bhakti, even in that. And at the same time, as they continued their in their bhakti, their practice, their lifestyle became more sattvic. That's also there. Generally, I'd put it this way: when you're first coming to bhakti, don't worry about anything except just try to get some spiritual food in you and chant the holy names. And as you're continuing and you want to maintain your practice, which is what it takes. It takes maintenance. It takes years of steadiness in practice to show Krishna you're serious and to really develop the internal connection and love. To have that means at some point coming to the point where you start doing some work to prune away the weeds, cut away the weeds in your life, get really good friends, unplug your TV, whatever it takes, whatever your choices are that put you in goodness, right? Like that. And that will help you maintain your bhakti practice. That'll help you be in the modes of goodness more. Because whenever you're practicing bhakti, you're transcendental. But like we heard in the yoga ladder, we can only practice so much of it, so there's these other levels too. So being in a mode of goodness lifestyle gives you it's like a trapeze artist. You're up there, you're balancing in bhakti. What happens if you fall away and you forget about Krishna? You have to hit that trampoline at the bottom. Better it's not a big, long fall. Better your baseline level is not like, I'm a dirty slob with addiction and I'm rude and awful to everybody who never takes care of themselves. My health is really bad. Better it's like, I respect people, I'm kind, I take care of my body, I honor myself and others. The natural world is worth protecting. I have healthy relationships. So even if I forget about Krishna, at least I don't destroy myself, and then I can come back to my bhakti devotional state more easily, right? We're gonna go up and down. So maintenance means like compressing that window, so the lows aren't so low, and you're not like frantic and manic with the highs either. You have like a steady, healthy, sustainable life that lets you be practicing bhakti for the long haul. That's the relationship between the two. Does that make sense?
She gave a thumbs up in prayer.
Yeah.
I would love to share something quickly if I could.
Sure.
So I studied and have studied Ayurveda, and basically throughout all my training, it's, we're talking about sattva, raja, and tamas, and as relates to diet and lifestyle and the mind and the times of day and all of that. And, what I found to be the most helpful, at least from my experience, and then as this relates to bhakti, is I think one of the most important things, like in our whole discussion tonight, is, trying to direct ourselves away from extremes and the black and white thinking, and that balance and moderation and finding those gray areas. But in Ayurveda, how I was taught was to really focus on like vata dosha and calming vata, because that just will help to restore just more balance and equilibrium in the body and the mind. And everything I find what we're doing in bhakti, everything supports that calmness, that vata, that sattva. And whether or not you're chanting, your mind's super active, or, maybe you eat a little bit of onion or garlic or whatever, it's like, best to not get too hung up on any of them and just really trust that, bhakti is the most sattvic and rebalancing and like reorganizing practice, I think that, that we can do. And as like just a really like umbrella sort of like blanket sort of like piece of advice that I would give that has been really helpful for me is I asked myself, am I moving towards balance? Am I moving towards sattva with like these choices? And am I moving towards love? And in the simplest way, if I can, make choices or actions or decisions based on, is this balancing? Is this moving me towards love? Is this kind of more sattvic? Then it becomes really clear. And that's just what I want to share, that I found just to be a little bit more like soft and just, ridiculously simplified. But that's what I found to be helpful from
Thank
my
you.
experience. Yeah.
Definitely. Like Ayurvedically, what we would say is that modern culture is very vata aggravating, and that manifests in terms of anxiety and like restlessness and fear and like difficulty sleeping and all these things that we see. Bhakti is a very grounding lifestyle, so that's there. One thing that came up for me that I wanted to mention when I was hearing you is like I talked earlier about how we can't like not sleep, for example, right? So we can't not be in ignorance to some extent, but even sleep is divided according to the modes of nature. If you plan out, I'm going to go to bed at the same time every night, wake up at the same time every morning, and you do it, and you're like, your body is ready to sleep at that time, you've done enough work in the day where you're tired but not overtired, and your mind isn't racing, you have sattvic sleep, it's sattvic rest. If you're kind of like all over the place, like you stay up all night sometimes, other times like you oversleep the next day to make up for it, you don't have regularity, that's more passion because you're staying up because you're trying to get stuff done or whatever. And tamas is like you don't even know when you go to sleep, you just conk out, just like practically you're narcoleptic, you just like pass out, you wake up not even knowing who you are. That's more tamasic. You're going to sleep either way, but you can organize your life so it's more the sattvic kind, and that'll be supportive. And the other thing I took away from what you were saying too is that when we fall away from our ideal, which is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, then the most grounding and healthy and reconnecting thing we can do is practice bhakti. Bhakti is the remedial measure itself. It's like there's no need to sit there indulging in guilt forever. A little bit of guilt is not bad if it helps you stay motivated to find your best self, But the best remedy is actually just get back on the horse. Practice bhakti some more, If you mess up, there's no like external kind of like atonement or external like process of, oh yeah, but I screwed up, so I gotta like do some ritualistic thing. I gotta like make it okay. It's like Krishna's not a lawyer. He's very loving, and the practice of bhakti is itself purifying. So even if you make mistakes, which came up in the 9th chapter. Like if you're really sincere, you make mistakes. If you stick with bhakti, if you stick in your dedication, you become saintly. So trust in that. Yeah, and organize your life in such a way that you can practice bhakti for the long haul, because that's what it's going to take. Any more comments, questions? Okie dokie. All right, so for this week, read the verses to chapter 14. There's only 27 of them. And if you're listening to this class, thank you for your attendance live or in the recordings. It'll be on YouTube. I'll send it on WhatsApp. Please leave a note on WhatsApp in the next few days. Some reflections, comments, anything that stood out for you. And yeah. Friday. We're going to read the whole Bhagavad Gita. There's going to be a Zoom link. We'll send it out on WhatsApp. It's Bhagavad Gita's birthday. Yeah. Okay. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. Burlington Bhakti Sangha and beyond ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. See you soon.
Bye, sweet souls.